Some things sound like fiction until they happen. Ask the man who lost 3 million in a briefcase and found a handwritten note in colored pencil instead. If you enjoy a good story, sit back, leave a like, and subscribe, or you might miss what happens next. It was a Tuesday, one of those days where even the wind seems to be working overtime. Around 11 in the morning, he stepped out of his Mercedes, suited in an outfit worth more than most people's homes. Phone to his ear, leather folder in hand, moving with such urgency it embarrassed even his own shadow. He sat on a park bench for precisely 23 seconds, just long enough to sign a document in peace. And that was enough time for destiny to slip through his fingers, literally. The briefcase was right there beside him, but not just any briefcase. A Louis Vuitton executive model with biometric lock and 3 million reais in cash inside. Why was he carrying that much? Don't ask. Rich people have habits no logic can explain. Point is, he stood up and forgot it, grabbed the folder, the phone. But the briefcase stayed behind, alone, on a public bench, in the middle of the city. Now listen closely. 10 minutes later, a barefoot boy showed up. He looked about 8 years old, wearing a torn Spider-Man shirt and eyes that didn't match his age. You know that look, of someone who already understands too much about life? He saw the briefcase, paused, stared, didn't touch it, just watched. Then a man approached. Dress shirt, loose tie, a company badge on his chest. "That's mine," the man said, with a smile faker than a 3 real bill. But the boy didn't buy it. "If it was yours, you'd know what's inside," he replied calmly, like someone with nothing to lose. The man insisted, tried to grab it, but the boy screamed, loud. So loud that a nearby security guard turned his head. The man vanished quickly. And the boy? He sat on the same bench the millionaire had occupied, held the briefcase with both arms, and waited, nearly an hour, not knowing for what exactly, until the black car returned. The millionaire jumped out, sweating beneath his silk tie, his face pale, his eyes lost, and there he was, the boy, sitting, briefcase on his lap, and a colorful note in his hands. When the man saw it, he froze, like he'd seen a ghost. "Where did you get that drawing?" The boy looked up at him and said a sentence that froze time. "My mom drew it before she died, and she said it was for my dad." Silence. The man sat down, stunned, looked again at the note, then at the boy, and began to tremble. Some stories start with money, but end with something money can't buy. And this one was just getting started. The man stayed frozen like a statue struck by lightning. The briefcase with millions? Forgotten. The expensive suit, soaked in sweat. Everything vanished except the note. He picked up that little folded paper, its edges nibbled by time, and stared at it like it was a miracle. It was a child's drawing. Simple. A house, a woman in a yellow dress, a child holding a balloon, and a man in a suit. Below it, written crookedly in pink pencil, "For my love, don't forget us." The boy watched in silence, the kind of silence that comes from learning to survive without answers. And he was the one who broke it. "Do you recognize the drawing?" The millionaire swallowed hard, tried to speak, but his voice cracked. Where did you get this?" "I've kept it since I was little." She said, "When I found the man in the drawing, I should give it to him. Only him." The man closed his eyes, pressed his lips together, then asked the question burning in his chest, "What was your mother's name?" "Clarice." In that instant, the world spun differently. Clarice, a name he hadn't heard in years, decades. And not because he forgot, but because he buried it deep, like someone tossing a key into a well and swearing never to return. He shot to his feet, pacing, rubbed his face as if trying to wake up. "This is impossible. Impossible." The boy clutched the briefcase and spoke firmly. "She died in sadness. She said she was forgotten, that the man in the drawing was a coward, but also said that one day he'd have to look in the mirror." The millionaire trembled, looked the boy in the eyes for the first real time, and saw something he didn't want to see. It was the same look as Clarice. "You, how old are you?" 8. And when did she die? 3 years ago. He sat again, as if his legs had vanished. Time stopped making sense. The math didn't add up. But that boy's face, that gaze, was his. The son he never knew he had, or the one he pretended didn't exist. The boy stood up, pulled from his pocket a faded blue ribbon. This was hers too. She said it was the gift he never opened, and he handed it over. The man took it, unfolded it with trembling hands. Inside the ribbon, a paper folded 7 times, and there it was. If you ever abandon me, you'll hear my silence in our son's eyes. The man lifted his head. The boy was still there, just like in the drawing. The park's silence seemed to scream, and for the first time in his life, that millionaire didn't know what to do with all the money in his hands. Some things are worth more than 3 million, and one of them is regret. But what that man chooses to do next is what will change everything. The man just stood there, frozen, with the $1 million briefcase on one side and a 30-cent piece of paper on the other, but it was the paper that weighed more. He tried to laugh, but no sound came out. He shook his head in denial, but it trembled. This doesn't make sense. I never knew. Never, he said, like someone trying to stop a speeding train with bare hands. The boy just looked at him, calm, no anger, only that silence of someone who's heard too many broken promises in life. Miss Clarice used to say she once loved a wealthy, charming man, but one who only wanted to keep her a secret. When she got pregnant, he vanished. The man stepped back twice, as if slapped. No, I didn't know. She never told me anything. She did. Sent letters, photos, even gifts. He widened his eyes. What photo? The boy pulled out a crumpled picture from his pocket. It was old. Clarice, young, holding a baby. On the back, written in cursive, "Your son is born. He has your eyes." The man collapsed onto the bench, hands clutching his forehead, as if his world was collapsing from within. I was out of the country. Yes, I got it. But I thought it was a scam. Someone trying to take my money. The boy replied with the coldness of someone who's learned to live without applause. It wasn't money. It was presence. But absence screams louder when the silence is a father's. The man stood up with difficulty, approached the boy, knelt. Tell me, what's your name? Raphael. But she called me Rafinha. She said one day I'd meet the man who gave me that name, and he'd look in my eyes and finally understand. The man tried to hold back the tears, but couldn't. They came, heavy, old, dusty with shame. Raphael, forgive me, I was a coward. Coward with her, coward with you, coward with the truth. The boy shrugged, not out of spite, but because he'd grown used to apologies arriving after the damage was done. She always said life isn't about what we have, but what we leave behind. Those words tore through the man like a blade. He looked to the sky and whispered, Clarice, why didn't you force me to listen? And then the boy, with the maturity of someone who carries absence in the chest, replied, because true love doesn't force, it waits. But her waiting ended a long time ago. The man closed his eyes, breathed deeply. Raphael, I don't know what to do now. I do, the boy replied firmly. The man blinked, stunned. You do? Raphael nodded. You're coming with me, to where she's buried, because you never went, and she's still waiting. Some encounters don't happen between the living. They happen between the debts of the heart. And this debt was about to be paid. It rained. A fine, stubborn rain, not enough to wash away anything, just enough to remind that pain still lingers. The cemetery was old. Beaten earth, rough grass, the smell of wilted flowers and damp memories. The man got out of the car in silence. No security, no tie, no hurry. Only Raphael by his side, holding a crooked umbrella, taking small but firm steps. This is it, the boy said, pointing. The tombstone was simple, Clarice dos Anjos, 1989-2017, and below, handwritten, the woman who loved even when she wasn't seen. The man knelt, removed his hat, and for a moment looked poorer than he ever had. I should have come sooner, he whispered. The silence around them seemed to listen. I ran, Clarice. I ran from everything that reminded me of you. even what we had, because I was too weak to face what I felt, and too stupid to realize what I lost. The boy just watched. He didn't cry, but his eyes looked wet on the inside. "She came here every Sunday," the boy said softly, "with a white rose and a new drawing." "Drawing?" "Yes, for you, always for you." The man swallowed hard, opened the briefcase he still carried, not for the money, but for the symbolic weight. He took out an envelope he'd kept for years, sealed, with Clarice written on the front. "I never sent this, but I wrote it. The day I realized maybe she really had loved me." He opened it, read aloud, "If I were brave, I'd choose you, not for what you have, but for how you make me feel. But courage was always the thing I most envied in you." Silence. The rain intensified. He placed the letter on the grave, then turned to the boy. "Give me one more chance, not to make up for the past, but to start something new." Raphael looked at him, thought, and replied without hurry, "The chance isn't yours, it's mine. But for now, you can walk beside me." And that's how they left the cemetery, a man carrying guilt and a boy carrying hope. But what neither of them knew was that Clarice wasn't the only one keeping secrets. 2 days later, the man showed up at a notary's office. Raphael stood beside him, and the briefcase was in his hand. "I want to register a new will," he said with determination. The clerk, surprised, recognized him immediately. He was one of the wealthiest men in the city. But now, he looked like just a father trying to make things right. "I want Raphael to have rights to everything I own. Company, properties, bank accounts, everything. But I want one thing to be clear. This is not charity. It's justice." The boy's eyes widened. "But why?" he asked. The man looked him straight in the eyes. "Because you're my son, and more than that, you're my second chance." The office went silent. But just then, something completely unexpected happened. An elderly lady entered the room. Grey hair, upright posture, piercing eyes. "You say he's your son?" she asked. "Yes. Why?" "Then you'd better take another look at that will, because Clarice left one, and she left it with me." Silence. The air seemed to freeze. "Who are you?" "I was her neighbor, her friend, almost like a mother, and keeper of what she most feared would be forgotten." She pulled an aged envelope from her bag, sealed. "She gave me this and said, only hand it over if he ever comes back, and only if he comes back with truth in his eyes." The man took the envelope with shaking hands, opened it, read it, and froze. Inside, a handwritten letter and an official document signed by Clarice. An early acknowledgement of paternity, with DNA test results, signatures, date, witnesses, and more, a formal request that the boy be raised away from him, if he didn't have the courage to accept him. The man remained silent. The elderly lady stepped closer. "She knew you were scared, but she also knew that maybe, just maybe, you'd try to come back. So she prepared everything, even the forgiveness." Raphael took the man's hand. "She knew you better than you know yourself." The man cried, but this time it wasn't guilt, it was relief, it was reunion. Some love waits, but some love prepares in advance. And Clarice had prepared everything. But what comes next? No one could have foreseen. 3 days later, a black car stopped in front of the mansion. A man stepped out, dark suit, leather case, sharp expression. "Mr. Augusto, may I come in?" He was the family's lawyer. But not just any lawyer, the one who had handled the inheritance of Augusto's parents and all his wealth. "Of course," said Augusto, wary. Inside, with Raphael sitting on the couch, the lawyer got straight to the point. "I'm here about Clarice's inheritance." Augusto was confused. "But she had nothing." "That's what you thought. But Clarice was the sole heir to a piece of land worth 12 million reais, a rural property that belonged to her father and was only officially recognized the year she passed." Augusto froze. "What? How?" "She never mentioned it. She chose to live humbly, but she documented everything. And guess who she left it to?" The lawyer opened an envelope. "To her son, Rafael dos Anjos, legitimate heir." Raphael's eyes widened. "But why didn't she ever tell me?" The lawyer smiled gently. Because she wanted you to grow up with character, not with inheritance. The man lowered his head. She was more than I ever imagined. The lawyer stood up. Now, the boy has the right not only to what she left, but to what you're offering, if it's truly from the heart. Augusto nodded. It is, because what I want more than anything now is to be a father, even if it's late. But just as the lawyer was about to leave, he gave one final message. Oh, one more thing. Clarice left a sealed letter for Raphael's 9th birthday, and his birthday is tomorrow. Augusto swallowed hard. What could she have written? Some letters arrive late, but never out of time, and this one is going to turn their world upside down. The next day dawned quietly. Overcast skies, empty streets, and inside that big house, which had only ever echoed with contracts and meetings, now there was the smell of chocolate cake with crooked sprinkles, made by a chef who had never cooked for a child before. It was Raphael's birthday, 9 years old, his first birthday with his father. The boy woke up early, put on the new t-shirt the driver had given him, and came down the stairs with a small smile, the kind that's afraid to be happy. Augusto, the man who had once been a partner in a multinational and now was learning how to be a dad, waited for him with a wrapped package in hand. Happy birthday, Raphael. The boy smiled. Thank you, but can I open something else first? He pulled the letter from his pocket, the one the lawyer had delivered the day before, sealed, written by Clarice, kept for 9 years, with neat, firm handwriting on the envelope. For the day you begin to understand the world. Augusto sat beside him, and together, in silence, they opened the past. The letter read, Raphael, my love, if you're reading this, it means you've grown. You've grown without me, and just the thought breaks my heart. But I want you to know, I loved you with everything I had. Even when I couldn't give you what I wanted, the world tried to tell me I was weak, that a woman alone couldn't raise a child with dignity. But you proved the opposite. Every one of your smiles, every question you asked, every night we spent in the dark was a miracle. And now, if the man beside you is who I hope he is, look at him. Yes, he made mistakes, but his fear wasn't of you, it was of himself. Raphael, forgiveness is a power. But knowing who deserves it is wisdom. Be wise and be kind, because your heart is bigger than all of this. Silence. The boy read it again and again, until with a shaky voice he said, she knew everything, even what we'd be feeling right now. Augusto held his hand. She was better than all of us. Raphael wiped away a stubborn tear and smiled. Can we eat cake now? And the two of them laughed for the first time. Laughed like people who understand that pain can become a bridge. But while they were eating, a phone call changed everything. It was the lawyer. Augusto. The letter had an attachment. A document Clarice left hidden. You need to come see it, because it changes everything. Some parties end with revelations, and this one is about to flip their story upside down. Augusto arrived at the lawyer's office like someone entering a church, hoping for a miracle, or prepared for punishment. The lawyer opened his folder carefully and revealed what no one expected. This, Mr. Augusto, is a document registered in the notary office 9 years ago and kept secret by Clarice. What is it? A contract, signed by her and a man named Elias Serpa. Augusto's eyes went wide. Elias Serpa? That's impossible. That man, he was your former business partner. Augusto went pale. But he died last year. Yes, but before he died he made a donation, a huge sum, directly to Clarice. Augusto trembled. But why? The lawyer took a deep breath. Because Clarice saved his life. One night when he nearly ended it, she found him collapsed in the street, took him in, cared for him, and never told anyone. Augusto covered his mouth with his hand. And what does that have to do with me? Everything, because in return, Elias promised that if anything ever happened to you or to Raphael, he would grant Clarice full control of the company. What? That's right. Clarice. was secretly a partner in everything you own, but she never used it, never asked for anything. She only kept it safe for her son. Augusto sat down, stared at the floor as if searching for answers in the cold tile. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just think, how could a woman who was rejected still manage to protect the man who turned his back on her? Silence. Then the lawyer placed one last envelope on the table. This one, she wrote for you, only for you, and with one condition. Do not open this if you're still a coward. Augusto didn't speak. He picked up the envelope, read the name written on it. Augusto, my final silence. Some words hurt more than a punch, and this letter will hurt. Augusto returned home with the letter in his pocket. He didn't say a word to Raphael, didn't mention the letter. He simply went up to his office, locked the door, and read. The letter said, "You saw me as weakness, but I was your salvation. You judged me for being simple, but simple is the one who doesn't complicate love. When I found out I was pregnant, I wanted to tell you, but fear in both of us was louder than the love I carried. Even so, I waited. Not out of dependency, but because I believed you didn't come back. But I learned that some people we lose, so we can find ourselves. Raphael is your second chance, and maybe your only one." The paper trembled in his hands. The tears came as if they'd been locked away for 30 years. He wept for what he hadn't allowed himself to feel. He hugged the letter and ran down the stairs. Raphael was in the living room playing with a toy car. When he saw his father, he stopped. "Is everything okay?" Augusto knelt down, held his son's face. "I'm a new man, Raphael, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving that to you." The boy smiled and hugged him tightly. But in that hug, there was more than forgiveness. There was a promise. The past can't be changed, but what we do with it can change the world. And Raphael, he's going to change a lot of lives. 2 months had passed since Raphael's birthday. That once silent mansion was now filled with the sounds of toys, the scent of simple food, and the laughter of a child echoing through the halls. But what looked like peace was only the beginning of a new storm. Augusto, who once ran companies and didn't know his employees' names, now knew everything about his son. How many teeth he'd lost, what he liked to draw, how he folded his shirt before bed. And Raphael was blooming. But one night, while going through Raphael's old drawings, Augusto found an old notebook. Its pages were yellowed, its sketches sad. One drawing stood out. It was a house with broken windows, children with darkened eyes, and a title at the top, House of the Forgotten. "Raphael, what's this?" he asked. The boy turned serious. "That's where I lived when Mummy got sick." "What do you mean?" "An orphanage, with other kids. We shared beds, food, and sadness." Augusto felt a pain in his chest. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because no one asks where we slept when we were invisible." Silence. "Where is this place?" "In a faraway neighborhood. I don't even know if it still exists." That night, Augusto didn't sleep. The next morning he launched an investigation. And 3 days later, there he was, standing in front of a crumbling building, its wooden sign rotting. Divine Light Association, orphanage and temporary shelter. Inside, peeling walls, thin children, and a heavy silence. He was greeted by a tired woman with sharp eyes. "How can I help you?" "My son lived here, and I came to ask for forgiveness." She said nothing, "And I also came to help, to change this for real." She gave him a faint smile. "I don't know if you're another politician campaigning, or just a father trying to redeem himself. Maybe both. But the difference is, I have urgency and money." And right there the project was born. A reconstruction. Not just of a building, but of everything Raphael had lost inside those walls. Some houses shelter bodies, but others shelter wounds. And this one was about to become a shelter for new beginnings. Received a call from the building doorman. "There's a gentleman here, says he's Clarice's father." Augusto went down, heart tight, and there he was, the same man with the cane and glasses, now holding an envelope. "I've come to talk about my grandson." Why only now? Augusto asked. Because guilt hid me for too long. They went up. Raphael was in his room playing until he saw the man and froze. Who are you? He asked. I'm your grandfather, boy, and I came to ask for your forgiveness. Silence. The old man sat, removed his glasses. His eyes were tired, but firm. I was a terrible father to Clarice, harsh, proud, deaf to her feelings. When she told me she'd raise a child alone, I kicked her out. I thought she'd bring shame to the family. But now the only shame is mine. Augusto sat in silence. So did Raphael. I spent years trying to forget, but when I saw her name on that painting, my heart started beating again. He pulled an envelope from his bag. This is the deed to a house. The house where Clarice grew up. I want Raphael to have it now. The boy held the paper. Does it still have her things? Yes. Her room is untouched. Diaries, drawings. I never had the courage to touch any of it. Augusto stood up. Let's go together. Now, the old man asked. Now. Some houses become museums of regret, but this one was about to become an altar of reconciliation, and inside there were more truths waiting than they ever imagined. The house was simple, worn wooden door, chipped paint, a scent of time lingering in the air. Raphael entered first, stepping softly, as if the floorboards still whispered his mother's voice. Augusto followed, silently. The grandfather came in last, quiet, humbled. In the bedroom, everything was frozen in time. The bed still had the floral bedsheet, the window was stuck, and on a crooked little shelf, a shoebox wrapped in a faded red ribbon. That's the one, said the old man. Raphael carefully picked it up. Inside, a small journal wrapped in cloth, and a dried flower between the pages. Her diary, whispered Augusto. Raphael opened it and read aloud, Today, I heard my son's heartbeat for the first time. It's small, but beats louder than anything I've ever felt. He turned the page. Augusto didn't reply, but that's okay. My son will grow up knowing he was loved, even if in silence. Another page. The shelter is cold. Sometimes there's no food, but when I look at my little one, I remember it's worth it. And another. If he ever finds out everything, I hope he knows I never kept anger, only longing. Raphael paused, eyes glistening. She was a giant, Dad. Augusto nodded, teary. She was everything I wasn't. Raphael kept flipping until he found an envelope hidden in the back cover. There's one more letter. He opened it and read slowly. For the day my son understands what a legacy is, the world will try to make you forget where you came from. It will offer you titles, status, fame, but never trade truth for display, and never let your name weigh more than your heart. With love, Mum. Augusto dropped to his knees. The grandfather turned his face, trying to hide his shame. And Raphael, he stood, firm. I won't forget her, and I won't let the world forget either. Some children are born to survive, but others are born to remind the world what truly matters. Raphael was born for both. 1 year later, on the same land where once stood a crumbling shelter, now rose a bright, modern building, full of open windows and children's laughter echoing through its halls. The sign at the front read, Clarice dos Anjos Institute, a space for education, art and shelter for orphaned and abandoned children, with a library, art room, auditorium, and a permanent exhibit of Raphael's drawings and Clarice's letters. At the inauguration, the entire city showed up, reporters, TV stations, politicians, but once again, it was Raphael who cut the ribbon, wearing a shirt that read, My name carries hers. Augusto, standing beside him, was no longer the same man. Now he walked slower, his suits were lighter, and his heart fuller. He stepped onto the stage and spoke, voice steady. I was an empty man with full pockets, and it was by losing everything that I found what truly matters. And what matters are people, our stories, our second chances. He paused. This institute isn't about me. It's about a woman who loved, even when she wasn't loved back, and about a boy who taught me how to be a man. Applause. At the end of the ceremony, Raphael found his grandfather and handed him a copy of his mother's letter. "She forgave you. Now it's your turn to forgive yourself." The old man cried silently. "Thank you, boy. You saved 3 generations with one hug." That night, no one went to bed without thinking of Clarice. Some names disappear from paperwork, but others become seed, and Clarice became the root of a future still full of fruit. The city moved on with its fast pace, as if it had forgotten what once nearly stopped time in that very square. But in a small corner of that same park, beneath the blooming canopy of a pink ipé tree, something new had been placed. A stone bench, simple, no luxury, no shine, but on it a small golden plaque. On this bench, a boy returned what the world never does: hope. It was the exact place where Augusto, 2 years earlier, had forgotten a briefcase with 3 million reais. But what he found that day had been worth infinitely more. Now, every Sunday morning, he returned to that spot. No bodyguards, no leather briefcase, only a cup of coffee in hand and a warm pão de queijo wrapped in a napkin. And beside him, Raphael, taller now, more cheerful, still carrying that same deep gaze he had since he was 8, the look of someone who had seen abandonment and still chose to love. They sat down, like they always did. Raphael opened his sketchbook and said, "Isn't it funny, Dad? If Mom hadn't told me to draw that note that day, we might have never found each other." Augusto looked at the sky, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. "I remember it like it was yesterday. I thought I ruled the world, but I was completely lost inside." Raphael smiled. "And now I'm just a man trying to honor the strongest woman I've ever known, and the bravest son I've ever had." The boy picked up a blue pencil and began to sketch. He drew a woman in a yellow dress, smiling, holding hands with a boy. In the background, a blooming tree, and that same stone bench. "She would have loved this," Raphael said softly. "She's watching, son," Augusto replied. "You think so?" The father looked at him with tenderness. "I believe when good is done, it echoes in heaven, and she hears every word, every gesture, every memory we refuse to let die." Raphael turned the page and wrote beneath the drawing, "Mom, the light that never went out." And in that moment, there, between pigeons, breeze, and memory, Augusto finally understood what true wealth meant. It wasn't the buildings they'd built, nor the institute, nor the millions back in his account. It was being right there beside his son, with a clean heart, with Clarice's name alive in every breath. It was knowing that, even after messing up so badly, he had received a second chance and knew how to use it. Raphael closed his sketchbook, rested his head on his father's shoulder, and they stayed there in silence. But the silence no longer hurt. Now it embraced, because some pain teaches, some loss purifies, and some love defeats even time itself. Some think they've lost everything, but maybe all they lost was what never really mattered, because what's rooted remains. And if this story touched you, tell us what you felt in the comments below. Leave your like to help strengthen the channel, and subscribe so you don't miss the next tale, told with soul, with laughter, with tears, right here on the porch of the heart with your Vovo Rico. See you next time.